He's back, folks. Originally scratched from the Kentucky Derby after his horrible performance in the Florida Derby, Classic Causeway is now back in the Kentucky Derby picture, and all I can say is I feel really sorry for Pioneer of Medina for being in the Kentucky Derby picture for like a day and then getting knocked back out because of Classic Causeway. An unlucky horse to be sure, but it's not 100% over for him. Early voting, the horse I covered in the last episode, may actually be gearing towards the Preakness instead of the Kentucky Derby, so that would make that episode obsolete, but now we got Classic Causeway, another iffy frontrunner, so let's talk about him. Another day, another Derby profile. Today's episode's going to be on Classic Causeway. Let's go. First up, as always, we got stats, and Classic Causeway is slightly more experienced than the average Kentucky Derby pupil this year, with 6 career starts, 3 firsts, 1 second, and 1 third. The only out-of-the-money finish was in that infamous Florida Derby, which he came in dead last, 11th place. Although, before that, his other major races were a third in the Breeders' Futurity, a second in the Kentucky Jockey Club, and a victory in both the Sam F. Davis and the Tampa Bay Derby at Tampa Bay Downs. So, he has a lot of experience in Kentucky Derby races, and with the exception of the Florida Derby, he's done mostly well. And same applies for the speed figure department. Both of his victories in the Sam F. Davis and Tampa Bay Derby were run with 104 speed figures, which is certainly above average, only 3 points below the top speed figures of 107 set by Zandon and Messier. So at his best, Classic Causeway can definitely be a speed demon. And that's mainly thanks to the fact that his running style is going to the front and asking questions later. His favorite kind of race is an undisputed lead, where he has usually about a length or so between him and the rest of his competition throughout the course of the race. However, even though it is a legitimate argument to say that he is all or nothing when he is on the lead, it is not a fair argument to say that he needs the lead in order to do well. In the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes, a race that was run at Churchill Downs, he was actually 4th throughout most of the race. Not until the top of the stretch did he actually move past 4th place, and he still managed to get 2nd, although he was pretty well beaten by Smile Happy. Still though, it wasn't a dead last performance like the Florida Derby. It was a decent 2nd, and he ended up out-finishing White Abarrio. And now with all of that covered, it's time to condense this into the strengths and weaknesses. For strengths, Classic Causeway is probably going to be a good money option. Most will throw him away because of his last race and say that he's just a horse who needs the lead to win. But as the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes did prove, he can do a little bit more than some people assume. And, as brought up before with early voting's episode, the Kentucky Derby always likes frontrunners. And if you look back at some of the more recent Kentucky Derby winners, both Maximum Security and Authentic were able to consistently keep at least a length or half a length between them and the nearest horse throughout the majority of the Kentucky Derby. So the idea of Classic Causeway getting an unchallenged lead, while still rather unlikely, it's not impossible and has been seen in recent years. But to be able to win such a race, you have to be able to sustain such speed over the course of 1.25 miles, and Classic Causeway may not be the horse to do that. As we bleed over into weaknesses, Classic Causeway's longest race was the Florida Derby, which he finished last in. Both of his biggest victories were at 1 16 miles, so distance might be a huge concern. As well as that, being challenged for the lead was a death sentence for Classic Causeway in that Florida Derby, so if he gets challenged at all, that's going to be a bit of a problem, and that is very likely to happen. So to get the ideal trip that he needs to perform at his best, he's going to need a lot of luck, and even if he gets that lucky trip, it may not be enough, and the distance might take him out anyway. As well as that, and I know I bring up that Florida Derby a lot, but it's very important. It's a sore thumb. And most importantly, he doesn't have a clear excuse for that race. He didn't bleed out, he didn't lose a shoe, and he didn't have an ulcer either. There was no clear sign of an injury anywhere during the Florida Derby. He just ran a really bad race. So the question is, what really happened? And for now, the best explanation we can really give is that he was challenged for the early lead, and he had to run further than he ever had before, and it was too much for him. Now, that may or may not be the case. Horses like Mandaloun proved that distance wasn't as much of an issue as their last prep suggested. But it is something to keep in mind here. And as well as that, history dictates he won't win, because the last horse to finish not in the top 4 in their final Kentucky Derby prep and then win the Kentucky Derby was Iron Liege in 1957, when he placed 5th in the Derby trial and then won the Kentucky Derby over Gallant Man. 1957 is a pretty long time for that to occur. So unless Classic Causeway makes some major history, that's going to be a really hard task for him to do. And despite the fact that in some ways Classic Causeway is slightly overlooked, there is still some very legitimate criticisms of him, and because of that, I have to give him a B- grade. If it weren't for the fact that he finished second in the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes off the lead, I would have given him a C grade, but thanks to having some versatility, I think Classic Causeway just gets out a C grade. But that's it for this episode. I apologize for how long-winded it was, but I had a lot to say about this guy. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, comment down other horses I should cover, and see you guys next time.